Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening at the National Press Club. I'm Mark Schuff Jr., the club's membership secretary and a reporter at CQ Roll Call. On behalf of Club President Emily Wilkins, I welcome you to the club for our cocktails and conversation about election fraud. We have a timely topic and an unbeatable news peg, with Election Day arriving 1 week from tomorrow. Millions of Americans have already voted. Tens of millions more will do so in the next few days. Will their votes be properly recorded and counted? How confident should we be in the integrity of the balloting system? We are joined by three experts who can answer those questions and many more. Starting from my immediate right, Jennifer Morrell is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of the Elections Group, a firm dedicated to strengthening democracy and improving the trustworthiness of elections. She is a nationally recognized expert on election audits and consults on election administration and auditing, including mail and absentee ballot processing, physical and cybersecurity audits, and chain of custody considerations. She is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, served as an election official in Utah and Colorado, and is an adjunct faculty member at the University of Minnesota's Hubert H. Humphrey School of Public Affairs. In the middle is Bill Kresse, a professor of auditing and fraud examination at Governors State University and a commissioner of the Chicago Board of Elections, as well as the founder and president of the Institute of Election Auditors. Bill, in fact, is known as Professor Fraud and has copyrighted that moniker. He is an attorney, a CPA, a certified fraud examiner, a member of the American Bar Association Task Force for American Democracy Advisory Commission, a special advisor to the ABA Standing Committee on Election Law, and an advisor to the Uniform Law Commission Committee on Election Law. He is a recipient of the ABA's Unsung Heroes of Democracy Award. And one other bio point on Bill, he is no doubt pleased and perhaps relieved that Notre Dame is back in the hunt for a college football playoff berth. And to my far right is Dick Riley. He is a PhD in CPA, certified in financial forensics, a certified fraud examiner, and a certified valuation analyst. He is also the Lewis F. Tanner Distinguished Professor of Public Accounting at West Virginia University and is nationally recognized for his contributions in forensic accounting and fraud examination. He has written 6 books, published 46 research papers, and has received numerous awards. He also developed and implemented fraud and forensic accounting education programs for the U.S. National Institute of Justice and the Internal Revenue Service. Dick is a local election volunteer as well. So we have, as you can see, an outstanding panel, and each of them will give an opening statement. I'll ask a few questions, and then we'll open the floor up to questions from the audience so that we are true to our name, cocktails, and conversations. So, Jennifer, why don't you start out?
Super. Mark, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's really an honor to be here with all of you. I'm so glad that you're drinking. That doesn't, not normally the group that I sit in front of. I hope that makes me a little bit more interesting and entertaining as the night goes on. For those of you that are covering elections, thank you. There has been just a tremendous effort this year to really accurately talk about the way that elections work, and so I just want to make sure I thank those of you that are doing that. As Mark mentioned, I ran local elections for about 10 years, and during that time, I faced sort of the normal challenges that you would expect in local election administration, things around operational challenges, making sure we could recruit enough poll workers, training them, the logistics of moving equipment around, thinking about how to make our processes better, how do we report faster, how do we improve the way that we audit or do internal quality control checks. But the one thing that I didn't have to deal with was the scrutiny and the criticism that election officials today faced. For whatever reason, for the most part, my constituents were generally happy. We would have one or two that would like to complain, but generally they would come and they would say thank you. We'd get notes of encouragement. I've spent the last 6 years working very closely with state and local election administrators in just about every state in the country. They're some of the most hardworking, dedicated individuals that I've come to know and love. As you know, 2020 was unprecedented. The challenges of administering an election during a pandemic were huge. They were enormous, and yet they did it so well. And I know you've all heard the mantra now repeated many times. The 2020 election was the most secure ever. So I'd like to kind of just start by saying the 2024 election will be even more secure and even better run because those same state and local election officials have done a tremendous job in dealing with the challenges head on, collaborating, working with state and federal partners and figuring out ways to do this more securely, more accurately, and more transparently. I wish I could end there and we could all go home and that would be a happy note. Unfortunately, the challenges that they're dealing with are unprecedented. It's unlike anything I've seen in my experience running an election. In fact, I realized just the other day, if I had to find something to correlate with what's happening now, I have to actually turn to my military experience of what it's like to prepare for battle or prepare for war or prepare to keep yourself and your fellow troops safe. So I'm excited to be here. I'm really excited to hear what's your questions, and I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thank you, Jennifer. First of all, I really appreciate the work that you do and the election group does. And thank you, Mark, for inviting us as well. And thank you all for showing up on a Monday night. And I thank Dick. Dick's a great guy, known for a long time. And it's funny, as Mark said, I am kind of in between these two in that I am also a university professor at Governor State University in Illinois. We're about 30 miles due south of Chicago. We're a state university where I teach auditing and fraud examination. I am also, well, I've even got the badge to prove it. I'll take it off because it's cutting into me. I am a commissioner of elections for the city of Chicago. And don't worry, I don't get free donuts with this or anything. But, and in that regard, I've been told I have to read this. Excuse me, Mark. Yes. I will not be speaking for or as a member of the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners, and any statements that I make are not necessarily the opinions or positions of the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. And please, no wagering. But in addition, I just want to say, as a season ticket holder for the Chicago Bears, I will not be taking questions about yesterday's game, okay? Yes. But it's, so I'm kind of, somebody's called me a unicorn in that I am in both worlds. I'm in the academic world, I am in the boots on the ground. Chicago Board of Election Commissioner, there are 3 commissioners. We are not elected. We get our appointments from the judges of the Circuit Court of Cook County. By state law, of the 3, no more than 2 can be of the same political party, so there are 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. We are not really even part of the city government. We are a separate governmental organization that is responsible for all elections in the city of Chicago. Now, show of hands, how many of you have heard things about elections in Chicago? Okay, yeah. We have somewhat bad reputation, but as I think you know, reputations are usually based in the truth. And the truth of the matter is, in the past, there was a lot of stuff going on in our elections. And I like to say we have cleaned it up a whole lot in Chicago. We've been called the gold standard of running elections and election administration. And I can't take credit for it. I'll take some credit for it. But I think that's one of the reasons that the judges thought that a fraud examination professor on the board would be a good idea. So we do things right, yet that reputation still follows us. But my job these last few years has been a breeze, has been easy compared to some of my colleagues in other parts of this country who are in charge of administering elections. To date, I have not gotten any serious death threats or needed to, I'll tell you, on social media, I will get ads for body armor just because I'm an election official. And that's not good. And it's horrible that we've gotten to this point. And hopefully, one thing that I like to do, one of the reasons I founded the Institute of Election Auditors, is to create a professional cadre of election auditors who could be called upon, because the public may not really trust politicians and public officials, but they do trust auditors. And I think if we can make that a more professional endeavor and credential those who meet certain standards and who have the appropriate training and background, I think we'll all be better at it. So that is what I am trying to contribute and start up, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Dick.
And I also want to echo the thanks that you've already heard. I appreciate you being here tonight. Thanks to Mark and the National Press Club for having us. I come at this from a kind of a different perspective. For the past more than 20 years, I have been doing work as a forensic accountant and a fraud examiner on behalf of clients. So across those years, I've testified in federal court, I've testified in federal bankruptcy court, I've testified in state court. And I think that what I bring to the table, by way of background, Bill called me one day and said, I'm creating this organization called the Institute of Election Auditors, and I'd like you to be involved. And I said, well, Bill, compared to you, and now that I've met Jennifer, compared to Jennifer, I don't really have that deep election background. He said, yeah, but you bring a level of discipline and approach to how we should be going about election auditors to ensure that they have the integrity that they deserve. So, a couple of the hallmarks that we find in forensic accounting is everything we do is evidence-based. We drill back into the evidentiary material and we make decisions based upon the evidence. We also have something called the elements of fraud. So when a fraud occurs, there's normally three things that happen. Normally there's the fraud act that somebody did something inappropriately, but there's also two other elements that are very critical are, one, what was the concealment? When there's fraud, there has to be intent. There's got to be a deliberate act to do something inappropriate. And so normally that deliberate act is manifested in their concealing or hiding their activities. And then the third kind of aspect of a fraud that we look for is, well, what did the perpetrator benefit from it? What did they get out of doing their act? They're not just going to do it for the heck of it, they're going to do it for some deliberate purpose. Now, in my world, that's more or less finance and forensic accounting oriented, normally it's money. But it can be a variety of reasons why people will do something. But when you're looking at something to determine whether or not I've got fraud, it's really important to stay focused on that. Do we have a bad act? How was it hidden from folks? Or what did they do to attempt to hide it? And then what was their benefit out of it? And so, as Mark noted, I also recently become an election volunteer as becoming a part of the Institute of Election Auditors. I felt that I need to know a bit more about elections. And to Jennifer's point, I was really impressed with the people that I've interacted with. The effort that they put into having and running and processing an accurate election is really, really impressive in what I've seen so far. And so those are my opening comments, Mark, and I'll toss it back to you.
Well, thank you to each of you for being here this evening. I'll start out with some questions. 1 week from Election Day, what is keeping you up at night concerning election integrity? If each of you could address that.
I'll try to be quick. Running a presidential election is hard. It is different than any other election simply because we see higher turnout. And one of the things that we've not done a great job of in this country is investing in the human infrastructure of running elections. And by that I mean most election offices are understaffed. Their facilities for the most part aren't as accommodating as they should be. They need larger, better facilities. So they've already got a hand tied behind them when it comes to a high turnout election. As we move through this next week, one more thing to add there. 1 in 4 election officials this election will be running a presidential election for the first time because of the turnover that we've had. And so my worry is you've got this pressure on the system. We know a presidential already drives high turnout, and we're seeing potentially record high turnout. We've got these challenges with not enough people, not enough space, and it's possible that we start to see little issues, operational challenges. We've seen a few long lines this week. We've seen some ballots that have gone out that maybe didn't get proofed appropriately. Things that just normally happen because we have a lot of human beings doing this work. What I worry about is those in any other climate, back when I was running elections 10 plus years ago, those would have been bad mistakes. They would have been embarrassing, but they would have stopped there. We would have learned from them and moved on. Now they become fuel or fodder for misinformation. So I worry about that. I worry about what might happen that might continue to sort of change the narrative around trust in elections. And then just on that, the amount of misinformation out there, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a tsunami. And I think one election official I talked with really said it best. They said, I've realized it doesn't really matter anymore what I say. I've brought people in, I've given them tours of my facility, I've explained all the checks and balances, I've showed them all the layers of security that we have in place. And this skeptical voter said to me, "Thank you so much, appreciate your time, I think you're lying," and left. And so, it's really tough environment to deal with all of this misinformation out there as you're trying to operate maybe one of the biggest elections of your career.
If I could chip in on that one. Your question is what keeps me up at night about election integrity. I really don't worry too much about election integrity. I've been a commissioner now for 9 years. I've been involved as a hearing officer and other things before that with elections. I've gotten to meet a lot of election officials around the country, and they do their job really, really well on small budgets and tight personnel. And unfortunately, every now and then mistakes will happen. We had a mistake in one county where the machines were printing out things on the wrong size setting, and it wasn't reading in the machines, and it became, as you say, fodder for the folks on social media saying this is proof that there was fraud going on. No, it's proof that we're human beings. That's it. I don't have a problem staying up at night because of election integrity. What's keeping me from sleeping is the misinformation and disinformation going on out there about our elections. These are very good elections that we run. And in fact, it's funny, the presidential election of all the elections is sort of structurally built so that fraud is difficult. We have, how many election administrations do we have out there? Like 10,000? Yeah, 10,000. I mean, if you're going to do fraud on this, supposedly massive scale, you've got to handle 10,000 different election administrations. And anything that big, you know what? It's going to leak out. Okay, as we teach in fraud examination, most frauds are committed by one person. Okay, sometimes two. So this would be huge. So a presidential election, I have no qualms about the integrity that we're going to have with this election. My problem is what people are going to say about myself and my colleagues who are election administrators in the integrity of this election.
From my perspective, as more of an outsider looking in, one of the things I observe is the speed with which allegations are made, and then the time it takes to address those assertions or those concerns. And if too much time passes, those assertions can become seemingly true, whether or not there's evidence or not behind it. And as a person who's done a lot of examinations and investigations over the years, it just takes time to do it right, and it takes time to do it thoroughly. And in this world that we live in, where there's a fast news cycle, there's a lot of pressure to get to the bottom of something as quickly as you can because you want to have an accurate outcome. And the speed and the pressure that I see is very challenging for folks.
You've each mentioned misinformation and disinformation or misinformation?
Both. But misinformation, it has to do with intent.
Yeah, just to explain very quickly, because I know I interchange those words. Probably a lot of people do. What's the difference?
You want to give that one, Jennifer?
Misinformation is like mistakenly telling somebody that early voting starts today when really it starts tomorrow. Disinformation is intentionally telling them it starts tomorrow, and malinformation is like the intent to lie. And Yeah,
the big difference is, with disinformation, there's an intent to deceive. You give a great example with primary elections. There was one attempt which was like, okay, now Democrats vote on Tuesday and Republicans vote on Wednesday. No, they both vote on Tuesday, okay? That wasn't a mistake, that was deliberate. And so that's the difference between misinformation and disinformation.
Okay, well, each of you has mentioned both. What's the best way to combat it? You can all jump in. On these questions, you can all jump in. Yeah.
Okay.
it's
Toss up.
so hard.
Yeah.
I think, again, and when I talk about like the leaps and bounds that I've seen over the last 4 years, we really are, as an election community, doing, I think, a much better job. Please tell me if I'm wrong, at putting out infographics, fact sheets, Mythbuster, trying to explain to people, this is how this process works. These are the layers of security that are in place. These are the quality control checks that we go through. These are the audits that take place both after the election and sometimes before the election. These are the levels of certification and testing that our equipment go through. So I think we've tried to approach it that way with mixed success. We've tried to tap into the human nature, right? Elections are ran by your family, your PTA president, your church members. Mixed success. I think the hard part is the information loop that we're probably all in is not where a lot of this disinformation is being discussed and covered. So I think for those that want to feel confident about the election, we're doing a great job of trying to get information out. I think for those that are undecided, we're still doing a pretty good job of trying to help them understand how it works. But there's at least none that I've seen, no magic bullet for the folks that have firmly decided that elections cannot be trusted and that there's fraud.
And there is always going to be that small percentage that are just convinced, especially, and political science professors will tell you this, people, their confidence in elections shifts depending on whether their candidate wins or not. So when one party's candidate wins, the other party says, they cheated. The next election, it goes the other way. The first party says, they must have cheated. So there's going to be a certain element. What's hurtful is all of the folks in the middle that kind of get dragged into it. Now, One of the things of the last few years that a lot of election administrators have done, including in Chicago, is try to be more proactive with it. That when something goes out and we hear something out there, try to respond to it quickly. Try to get messaging out first. There was some handouts we had for the Institute of Election Auditors, and if you go to our website to a resources page, we have a video that the Chicago Board did with the American Bar Association called Why You Can Trust the Voting Machines. And it shows all of the levels of controls and testing that we do with all of our machines. In Chicago, we have 1,291 precincts. Okay, so that's a lot of machines. And every single machine is tested by technicians. And after the done testing, we place a seal on it that if somebody, it's a pre-numbered seal, we record the numbers, we do all the chain of custody stuff, and if somebody tries breaking it off to try and get into the machine somehow, you will know it immediately. None of the machines are connected to the internet, so you can't get into it. And yet, I was at a conference not long ago, and I had someone there who was just convinced no matter what we do, whatever forces out there are hacking into the machines. After the election, we go back and check the applications, the software, to make sure it hasn't changed. And still, well, they went and changed it all back. Well, there's certain people we're never going to convince. Okay. But it's the rest of them. So we're putting the information out there. And we're telling, we've got videos on our website. You can watch it. It shows you how it's done. And yet, yeah, that's good and all. But, this guy on the internet says that there's this, all this fraud going on. And, he's got a cute internet site, So it gets very frustrating. So how you battle it, as I say, I think we have to be proactive with responding as quickly as we can and be proactive in getting the messaging out. So if anyone really is interested, the information's out there to show them that, yeah, we're doing a heck of a good job. And people think, well, again, going to auditing, and one of the things we teach auditors when going out to an audit, they have to think like a fraudster. Think of all of the ways in which someone can do it, and we do that. And that's why we put these controls in place. We try to figure out all sorts of ways. It's not like we're just figuring, oh, well, just put a machine out there and count the votes. No, we have thought this through, folks. We've put the controls in place. And it's just so frustrating when, again, somebody will put something out on the internet, and or there'll be some human error done in some jurisdiction, and suddenly there's this massive fraud going out there. So, as I say, I know these people, and they do great work.
I think it can be helpful to, in the way I approach my world is the same way journalists approach yours, and that is you ask the basic questions. So you think something bad is happening. Tell me who is involved, who are the perpetrators, what are they doing, how are they doing it, when, and where. And you're looking for specificity. Broad allegations don't help anybody. You can't really investigate broad allegations. So when allegations come up, you're looking for those the normal journalistic questions, and it's the same thing we do in forensic accounting. Who, what, where, how, and when. The one question you notice I didn't ask is why, and that's because why is internal to a perpetrator when we wouldn't ask that. And then the follow-up question from the basic questions that one asks is, well, what evidence do you have? What makes you believe this? What evidence can you point us to? Because we need a place to get started. And so for us to do our work, whether it's a forensic accountant, a journalist, or anybody, it's who, what, when, where, how, and then what evidence can you point to that we can get started to kind of take this on. And once you've got that, if you have a legitimate concern by somebody, they normally can answer, if not all, most of those questions, and they can point you in that direction, and it gives you a starting place to start digging around.
Mark, can I add something here?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't want to be Pollyannish and tell you everything's great. There are some areas for improvement. One of the areas is the way that most election offices report their post-election audit process. So thinking about the work that both of you do, we've really encouraged and developed a set of like tools and templates for election officials to create audit reports that are both meaningful to accountants like Dick and Bill, but also easy enough that any of us can read them and understand, what did I audit? What did I look for? Who was involved in the audit? What discrepancies did we find? So there is an opportunity to learn from the auditing field in the way that we communicate some of those more technical parts of the election.
Questioning election results is something that has occurred throughout American history. And for instance, Chicago was at the center of a question on whether John Kennedy actually won the election. Did Chicago flip it? Did John Kennedy over Richard Nixon in 1960? However, since let's say in recent memory, is the questioning of election integrity mostly because of the doubts that former President Trump has cast on the process? Or is it something more fundamental and organic that is coursing through the American electorate?
Well, I have to be careful of what I say. I think there's one thing I'll comment on is essentially, I've kind of touched on it before, a structural flaw in elections, in which we call in business disciplines information asymmetry. The election officials have the information, the public want it. Okay, can you trust them? We like to say, hey, you can trust us. We're we're like you. What's the famous motto or slogan in journalism? If your mother says she loves you, check it out. Well, that always draws laughs because it's your mom. You trust your mom. Okay, so if a government official says, this is the results of the election, do you trust it? Especially if the election is run not by an independent commission, but by someone whose name was on the ballot, okay? Which is, what do we do when we have situations of information asymmetry? We bring in a information intermediary. Corporate financial statements, right? Corporations put out their financials, say, look what a great year we had. And you're like, wait, maybe I should buy some stock, but wait a minute, can I trust that? And you turn to the last page, and there's a certification by certified public accountants to say, yeah, we checked out the books, we audited it, looks good. If I was selling you my house, you might ask me, hey, how's the roof? How's the electrical? How's the HVAC? And I'll say, they're great. Now in Illinois, I have to sign a statement saying that I'm not aware of any problems. Can you trust it? What might you do? You might hire a certified home inspector to come in, someone who's an expert at that, who knows what they're doing. He'll give you a report and tell you. I would like to see, and this is kind of the idea behind the Institute of Election Auditors, a time when we do audits now. I want to make audits, part of the system. Just as you expect corporate financial statements to have been audited, I want to see a broad, bustling election auditing going on so that people can restore confidence in our elections. Right now, different surveys show that it's approaching 50%, the percentage of the public who don't have confidence in our elections. Well, if you call yourself a democracy and you can't get half of the people to have confidence in your election, there's a problem there. So I think having elections regularly audited, giving people confidence in the election is one way to go because, as I say, there's this kind of structural flaw there.
So Jennifer and Dick, are we basically here today because of the many unfounded claims former President Trump has made about election integrity, or is there more to it than that out there? And that's why we're all wondering what's going to happen on Tuesday.
It's interesting. I think it's a tough question. I don't know how Dick feels, and I don't know why. I don't know why we all feel like we've got to dance around it a little bit, and that if I definitively tell you yes or no, I know that that's going to impact the way people view me. It will impact my business, right? Because we're afraid to say yes. Lies were told, and they have had an implication, a real huge impact. But I don't think just on elections, actually. I think this is a whole of society problem. One of the tools and resources that we've made available to actually that might surprise you, because we're really operational folks. We like to focus on the nuts and bolts of testing voting equipment and proofing ballots and how do you train poll workers. But in doing this work over the last few years, we came to realize that there were two things that election offices needed that weren't out there. One was training on resiliency and mental health that talks about trauma and burnout and chronic stress and techniques that you can put in place to try to deal with it, not to take the place of needing professional help, but some intermediary things that folks need. The other is de-escalation training, how to deal with conflicts. And what was interesting to us is that not only were they some of our most popular resources, but they weren't just being downloaded by election officials. We were seeing public health administrators, folks that are working in K through 12 education, emergency room doctors, people in the health profession. And I'm sure those of you that are journalists here have probably seen those stories, but I think it goes beyond. It's like a general sort of mistrust in government and beyond.
Dick?
You've really asked a question really that's more about sociology. So it's a bit beyond my sandbox.
Okay. All right.
But if I could just toss in one more thing, and this is I think having a public which is skeptical is a good thing in a democracy, okay? But it's when it gets into sort of toxic skepticism and cynicism, okay? And for so many decades, the public could also turn to journalism. And they're in there doing the work for the public. And I don't have to tell you folks the changes that have gone on in your profession. And I think along with what we're saying up here, America could really use a reinvigorated, stronger, vigorous journalism in this country. And I'm starting to see parts of it going on, and I'm very, hopeful. And I think I'm going to, hold out hope that we're going to have a great, resurgence of journalism, because it's the one profession that's named in our Constitution, right? In our Bill of Rights. They don't talk about accountants. They should, but they don't. But or lawyers, for that matter. Well, I guess they kind of do, but right to counsel. But I think all of this combined in some great, vigorous, rigorous journalism would be a great thing for America.
Well, the National Press Club is certainly at the forefront of preserving journalism and strengthening it and making sure that it serves the public as well as we can. And there are all sorts of forces sort of working against that right now, financial and others. That would be a different cocktails and conversation. But looking at the race we have before us in the battleground states, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, one thing I've noticed that they all have in common is controversies over state laws, lawsuits about about changes legislatures and governors, I suppose, have made in voting procedures and other kinds of challenges. Take us on a tour through the battleground states. Are there particular ones? I know Georgia is going back and forth about a law there. Are there particular ones that concern you, and why?
Whew.
They're all concerning. This is really about priming for post-election litigation.
Yeah.
So, if the margin is tight, these changes, these challenges, even those that have been struck down, they're intentional. They're setting the stage for a pretty litigious post-election process. So I don't know that it's worth going into detail on each state. I think one important thing, though, to note is, through as we think about the lawsuits that are there, we think about what the post-election process is going to look like. One thing to keep in mind is there's been these counties and state boards that have threatened to not certify their election, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of conversation about the implications of that. I think one thing that has been made clear through this is that it's not a choice, it is the law. They do need to certify their election, regardless of how they feel about how things went or what have you. So it's going to be interesting and tough.
Yeah, and just in your own backyard here in Virginia, we've got this case with regards to a couple of thousand people, isn't it, who are suspected of being non-citizens. They were on the rolls and they were taken off, but they were taken off within 90 days before the election. The federal law says you can't do that, and it's going right now, I guess it's going up to the Supreme Court. So there's a lot going on out there, but as Jennifer said, there is a lot of planning on both parties for post-election litigation. My friends in the election bar are, kind of priming for it. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, the changes in the laws, we had these massive changes that had to be put into place in 2020 due to the pandemic. And then there was, some, clawback on some of those. And I'm sorry, Mark, I have enough trying to keep up with the changes in the law in Illinois to worry about all these other places.
I just thought I'd throw it out there, Dick.
Yeah, but I think you make an important point. It was kind of subtle, but it's an important one, and that is there's a difference between what the election officials are charged with, and that is applying the law or executing the law and the regulations around that. And then you've got these legal issues on the periphery that are, presumably what your election officials are doing, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, county by county, is they're executing and counting votes based upon the law as it exists, and they've been trained to follow. And yet there are other issues related to the law, but they're separate and distinct. And I think we need to try and separate those out. What are legal challenges related to maybe it's state interpretation of the law or the way things are being done, and separate that from allegations or concerns that whether or not the votes are being counted appropriately when they're being counted by the election officials.
Well, these questions will be sorted out either by the state legislatures or the court system. Are those two institutions prepared for the challenges that are coming?
No. You're never entirely prepared because until it shows up, you don't know what it's going to be. Okay, so it's like, okay, the courthouse doors are open, bring it, and then hopefully we've got, and having also been a law clerk to a federal judge, you take what comes in front of you and you try to apply the law and the facts and come up with the wisest decision in doing so. But you really don't know what the question is going to be until it shows up on your door.
Jennifer, Dick, do you have anything to add?
Only that I have heard that there is hope that the courts are prepared to move quickly. I
Yeah.
think they do have a good understanding of the timeline that we're on. So I'm actually hopeful that they will be the ones that hold the line.
Right. So I'm going to turn to the audience for questions here in just a moment. So think of something, and when the mic comes around to you, please identify yourself and your affiliation, where you work or what group you belong to, that kind of thing. Well, let me ask one more question before we go to the audience, though, and that is, we already have, according to some estimates, 31 million people who voted early. Are we seeing any problems with early voting?
Not in Chicago. No, it's, I haven't. One of the things that, you mentioned problems and such. One of the problems that we have with early voting is, depending on the state law, what we can do with those ballots once we receive them, especially vote-by-mail ballots, sometimes called absentee ballots. When we get them back, what can we do with them? Now, in some states, you just sit on it until the close of Election Day, and then you can start comparing the signatures on the outside of the envelope or whatever else gets compared, opening the envelope, pulling the ballot out, start, stacking them up, running them through machines, what have you. Fortunately, in Illinois, we're allowed to process them. So we can do everything, including running them through the scanners. We just can't have our computers, our servers, tabulate the numbers. So come 7 p.m. on election night, we have someone in our computer room enter the order, and it starts adding them all up and putting those votes up on the screen. So you hear sometimes the complaint, well, how can state X get their results in so quickly and state Y takes this many days? Well, state Y is still opening envelopes, okay? Likewise, in Illinois, we accept vote-by-mail ballots up to 14 days after Election Day. So if we get a ballot in 2 weeks later, we might accept it if it's been postmarked by Election Day. Now, a question I often get is, well, I don't see postmarks on my mail anymore. But yes, you do. If you look at the very bottom of letters that come through, there'll be a barcode, okay? And that includes the date it was mailed, the date it was first processed. And our equipment at the Board of Elections, we can read that. And so if it was dated on Election Day before, it goes into the pile to get counted. If it was tossed in the mail afterward, it doesn't get counted. We don't open the envelope or anything. We notify the voter because the outside of the envelope has a barcode for each particular voter. We'll notify the voter, sorry, yours was mailed too late. So our final certified numbers aren't for several weeks after the election because we have to keep the ballot box open for 2 weeks. So each state has different rules on what they can do, how they can process those early voting and vote-by-mail ballots. But for following the rules that we have in place, it's been functioning wonderfully. And I know a lot of folks who have told me that they've already voted and they're so glad they've got it done and they've done their duty, and now on election night, election day, they can just sit back and relax. I can't, but they can.
So I think operationally, things are actually going really well. What I worry about is it feels like there might be groups or individuals at this point that are trying to break the system. We had 2 drop boxes set on fire this morning. We've had 2 instances, Pennsylvania and Colorado, of people submitting groups of fraudulent applications and ballots. We're feeling, I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist myself, sorry, but it's starting to feel that way, that there are people out there that are intent to hurt or break the system. We had the individual in Arizona that was just arrested with a lot of weapons in his car. That sounds like, it's still under investigation, but intent to do harm. So that's what worries me, is that seems to be these instances that we are unusual, that we haven't seen before. We have our federal partners just announced Russian propaganda in the appearance of a video that was made to appear that ballots were being ripped up in a jurisdiction in Pennsylvania. So it is a little bit different. It is a little bit worrisome.
Nothing to add.
Okay. All right, let's turn to the audience. Just raise your hand, and Michael Madison will bring the mic to you. Let's start with that lady. Again, tell us your name and your affiliation.
Hi, I'm Jody Beck, and I'm officially retired, but I worked in print and broadcast journalism, and I taught journalism. I don't remember recently seeing anybody trying to do math without their phone. And I'm astounded that people think that human beings counting paper ballots is better than machines counting paper ballots. Are you running into that, and what is your response to it?
Everywhere. I get asked that all the time. So I was just mentioning to Bill and Dick before the conversation tonight that human beings are terrible at tedious, repetitive tasks. It's why we invented computers. We know that we've seen both in research that's been done around recounts, but also recently in, I'll just call them hand count experiments in a variety of counties over the last year, that not one single one of those was done without inaccuracies. It's also very efficient. We know that it would take an army of people, in many places a convention-sized hall to house all those people, and potentially could take much longer to create results and reports. So, and there are so many other things that our voting systems do that people don't think about. When they say we just want to hand count, I think they're only thinking about the little oval that gets filled out and making a tick mark. They don't think about all of the reports that we rely on that give us district level results, precinct results, results in a whole bunch of different formats. They really don't think about the needing to count not just one candidate or one race, but many races, sometimes over multiple cards. So it really is a complicated process, and our voting equipment does an incredible job doing that. Where humans come in and where humans can play an important role is when we do audits. When we actually take a sample, because we don't want to implicitly trust the machines, and so we do have humans take a sample of ballots and review those as a way to verify that the machines were programmed accurately, interpreted the voter mark correctly, and added those up correctly, did the math. So, humans, hand counting, that has a place and a role when we're doing audits, but certainly not for hand counting all of our ballots, all of the contests, and producing all of the results reports that we've come to rely on.
Yeah, I hear this on social media and such, we got to get rid of the machines and just hand count everything. Two things I'll just say. One, we do some hand counting in our auditing. In Illinois, we don't select the precincts, but 5% of our precincts are selected by the State Board of Elections. We don't know which precincts they are until after the election. And then we bring the paper ballots in, and we have a team go through and count them to make sure that they reflect what the machines reported. So there's that accuracy. The machines are great with accuracy. And then there's the convenience, if you will, because here's a sample of a Chicago ballot. I don't know what your ballots look like. That's Chicago, side 1, side 2, page 3, side 1, page 4, side 2. So that's we have up to like 98 different races on a ballot. Now, mind you, Illinois has more elected officials than any other state by far. We have about 44,000 of them. So we're kind of an exception there. We're special. But it would take us months to hand count all of that. Just in Chicago, we have 1,291 precincts. because of all the different districts, congressional districts, state legislative districts, judicial districts, county districts, we have to print up over 400 different ballot styles for all these different, races in each of these precincts. And we print them up in several different languages, plus in each precinct we'll have an electronic touchscreen machine. Afterwards, we have a paper ballot that gets printed out from their selection, and that's programmed in 12 different languages because of all the languages that we have in this, are used in the city of Chicago. So to try and hand count all that, it's just not feasible.
The machines also provide various subtotals and counting that's reconciled back to the totals. And as an example, in West Virginia, when you go through and you check yourself in or somebody checks you in, you're given a piece of paper that's given to the first person, and that person then gives you a ballot. You go count the ballot, you go put the ballot in, you pull your ballot out, and then you carry it to another machine where it's actually tabulated. All of that is checked out at the end of the day to make sure that all of those things tie out and are continuing to be accurate. And including going back to the number of people that walked into the polling residency that day, that we don't have any more ballots or any fewer ballots than we should based upon those counts. So those machines not only provide a layer of accuracy, they also provide layers of controls to make sure that those that showed up to vote actually had their votes counted and so forth. So those machines actually enhance the control environment, not just beyond the mere counting of the ballots.
And they have an audit log, which when humans count, you still need a way to verify that they counted correctly. There's no audit log. That's one of the great things about our technology today is there's a lot of transparency built into it.
And in my office at the Board of Election, I have a over 100-year-old ballot box, which was used in Chicago before we started bringing the machines in. And you had handwritten paper ballots, you put in the ballot box and all that. And that was during an era that I like to call the golden age of election fraud, okay? If we want to return to the golden age of election fraud, yeah, let's bring back those paper ballots and hand counting them.
Madison, how about this? Okay, back there, and then this gentleman right here next.
My name is Sanjay Suri. I'm with CNN News 18. We are the Indian cousin of CNN. I'm not American, as you can hear. Some of us, when we hear of allegations of fraud, certainly think of January the 6th, 2020. And with that in mind, is there a distinction to be made between genuine fraud and fake fraud? If we are thinking of genuine fraud rather than misplaced allegations of fraud without basis, then I'm not hearing from the panel any prospect or any real fear of real fraud in this election. What we are hearing, I think, is reassurance that there can be no fraud. So I'm not sure what this meeting is about.
Can there be no fraud? Oh, there's always going to be somebody trying to do something, okay? What we see, I know like down the street, Heritage Foundation has a database of like 1,500 cases of election fraud going back 40 years. Most of your cases of fraud are at a local level, okay? It's somebody trying to help this guy who's running for mayor of their small town, or at most it bubbles up to maybe a congressional race. But it's somebody perpetrating a fraud relating to a smaller unit of government. And so people are going to try to commit fraud. I think, Dick, you can talk about that more, So no fraud, no. But massive fraud of the scale able to swing an election, a presidential election, I think we know that the systems in place will not allow for that.
with fraud, the challenge with fraud is a perpetrator has a lot of time to think about how to beat a system. And given enough time, most systems can be beaten, particularly if that system is relying on humans and maybe the perpetrator, understands that that human weakness is there and the human may not have the time to do their job. They may not have the resources to do their job for whatever reason. But perpetrators can and do find ways around systems. And one of the things when we talk to our students about financial fraud at WVU or when I'm speaking in other groups is never inflict your value system on what somebody will or won't do, because they will invariably shock you or surprise you with the creativity that they will use to beat the system. So can there be actual frauds, and is the system perfect? No, the system isn't perfect. Can people perpetrate it? Hopefully there are systems in place to identify it if it occurs. We have seen, as Jennifer has mentioned, there's been a number of attempts already that have already been identified. And you know, once we get an allegation, if and when those arise, the important thing is we start asking the right questions again that I mentioned earlier. Who, what, when, where, and how. How did they do it? What evidence do we have? And then we start drilling back to figure out, well, where is the breach? How big was it? How many votes are at issue here? Because we want to try and get it to a measurable number as quickly as possible. In most instances, as Bill pointed out, it's you know, the number of votes that they could get their hands on may not be enough to sway an election. But there are, you know, we are anticipating a very, very close election here. So we do need to keep our eyes out. You know, we need to be our eyes open. We need to keep our ears open. We need to be paying attention. And when somebody makes an allegation, we do have to ask the questions and ask what evidence they have to see if there is any merit there. And then we, you know, we let the process evolve from there, where we do look at the specificity and the details to figure out what's going on and whether it really happened or if it's a false claim of fraud.
I think Dick makes a good point, though, that those instances were often caught before the individual was voted or before the ballot was counted. I know that in every state there are laws and penalties for committing fraud. When I was running elections, I remember, again, a presidential year with close to 400,000 voters who voted. And we went through the same sort of exhaustive process that Bill described in validating mail ballots. We found 6 that did not get through, that weren't counted, that were questionable, that we turned over to the district attorney's office for investigating. One of those actually ended up being charged. So I do think the layers of security are working to identify those rare instances where somebody does try to test the system or get creative. I think we're doing a pretty good job there.
Yeah, and it's just, if I just want to emphasize, we take allegations of fraud very seriously. Somebody said to me, well, what if I come into your polling place and you know, try changing, you know, the software in one of your machines? I said, fine, you'll leave in handcuffs. But no, we have no hesitation to calling local, state, and federal authorities, and we work very closely with the federal agencies, the FBI, and my favorite, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Those folks do a marvelous job. And yeah, we take it very seriously. You know, are people going to try and either commit a fraud to get their candidate more votes or what have you, or just to test the system? You know, I'm not going to be so stupid as to say, bring it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we're always on the watch for it, and we are confident in the integrity of our systems, but we are not going to hesitate to call in law enforcement when we feel there's a valid allegation.
How about the gentleman right here?
Thank you. My name is Øystein Bogen. I'm a correspondent with Norwegian National Broadcasting. I'm also a certified election monitor in Europe, and back in the days wrote my thesis in political science on election fraud and election malpractice in modern Russia. where it's of course on a different scale than in the US. So I'm just thinking, you know, there is no such thing as a flawless election anywhere in the world, right? There's always going to be some small examples of fraud.
We're
but
humans.
it's at the moment when it happens on a systematic, large scale that it's going to be really problematic. And the problem here in the US seems to be the lack of trust, you know, from the voters to government on different kinds of levels. And this is not the only example in world history where this has happened. I just want to, you know, refer to the examples of Romania, 1990, after 60 years of communist rules, they had an election. Russia, 1991, same thing. South Africa, 1994, no trust, first elections. So what did they do? They invited armies of election observers from abroad who helped. They were at the polling stations. They observed. They didn't do anything active, but they helped restore that trust, you know, between public and the governments. So this year, there are 64 election monitors here from the OSCE in the US, a very small number. So my question is really, do you think that if it were possible to increase the staff of election monitors from abroad, for instance, from friendly nations in the US, could that help in any way to restore that trust here?
Well, it couldn't hurt. We know that observation is a really important part of our elections. Even in addition to international monitors, right? We have observers or watchers that are designated by parties and campaigns and candidates to go in and watch and observe. And while sometimes they can be contentious, we recognize that they have an important role to play. I would add the Carter Center has done a great job in sort of exploring what more international observation might look like in the US. So I hope that we see more of that. I think more voices that can understand how the process works and attest to the fact that it was carried out in accordance with law and followed all of the policies and practices that needed to be followed. I think that's super helpful. I think one thing we forget is that there's all these allegations being made and have been made for the last few years about our voting machines flipping votes, about mail ballot voting, now non-citizens voting. We're hearing the litigation around overseas citizens voting. We've yet to see individuals making those claims actually bring proof, bring evidence to substantiate or back up the things that they're saying. So can observers help sort of counter that by producing evidence or testimony, to back up what the election administrator is stating? I think it would be great.
Madison, how about
Can I comment on that really
Go
quickly?
ahead. We'll go to this.
And the
woman
other
in a few
thing,
minutes.
I've known Americans who've been international observers as well, and I think I don't have a difficulty with it. Plus, we have visitors from around the world come to Chicago and look at how we do it, and so there's a learning process that could be beneficial as well. So I have no objection with it. Thank you.
Can I?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Tell us your name and your affiliation.
Okay, good evening. I come from the other side of the Atlantic, Albania, so a small country in Europe. So I just want to tackle down. I'm from the IVLP program from the State Department and Cultural Vista. I'm a professor of communication and media trainer on disinformation, and I want to tackle that thing a bit. Generally, when disinformation comes, there are a lot of narratives that hold on to that. So it looks like in the USA, the machines are like the ending of this disinformation campaign. Have you ever tried to work with journalists or media trainers to debunk what kind of disinformation narratives are there so that you can prevent somehow the mistrust or the distrust on the machines? Because like machine is the ending. Many other things might have happened so that make people believe that the problem is there. So have you held any campaigns about that? Thank you very much.
We have in Chicago, and we're always open to, we've got a full-time director of public information, and who reaches out to our media in Chicago all the time, bring them in, show them the equipment, show them all the controls that we have, all the testing that we do. As I say, we produce videos as well that we share with them that are readily available for them to use or to refer to. So yes, and we, I have no problems with journalists, and I love journalists. I married one. So, so I think it's a great idea working with the journalists. Yes.
Yeah. Could really benefit things. The more people, the more eyes, rather international observers, journalists looking at the systems. You're trying to come at this from as many different directions to try and help people understand the integrity of the system, and also that when somebody sees something that's inappropriate, to bring it forward, because we do embrace those concerns as well, and we're prepared to look at or investigate, concerns that people have when those concerns are brought forward.
This woman here.
My name is Aisling, and I'm Irish, obviously, and I'm here with a delegation of journalists from across Europe as part of an ILVP program with the US government. So thank you all for your presentation. It's really heartwarming to listen to your presentation, and I suppose the processes and everything that you're doing to secure electoral integrity. But and I particularly, I follow US politics from Ireland. Obviously, the US is Ireland's largest trading partner. This election is really, really significant for us, given the fact that we're so reliant on foreign direct investment from America and the implications with whichever administration comes next. But I'm just wondering, it's a really simple question. When are we likely, given all the factors, to get a conclusive result from the presidential election? When are we likely to know, okay, this is the president, and how long will that take?
So 70% of the election jurisdictions in this country serve about 8% of the voters, and vice versa. 8% of the jurisdictions serve about 70% of the voters. I think a majority of those jurisdictions will be reported on election night. I think it's likely we will see some of the larger jurisdictions that have taken longer. Again, we have this complexity of different states have different laws and when and how they can count ballots. But I think it's likely that we will see in all of those swing states. Georgia has made some changes to their laws. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, I think they've just made some process improvements to compensate for not having their laws changed. So will it be the next day? Likely not. It will probably take a few days. But I would be surprised if we're waiting. I hate to make predictions.
No, go ahead.
Past Thursday or Friday.
Boy, they all wrote it down.
But it really depends on how tight the margin is and how close the race is. And if it ends up being tight in places, tight enough that we trigger automatic recount laws, or there's room for candidates to request a recount, there may be in some states an unusually high number of provisional ballots. If it's tight enough that we need to wait for those provisionals to be counted, or states that have a large number of voters voting by mail and they allow the voter to cure a deficient return envelope, they may allow up to a week for that to happen. So if it's that tight and we're needing to get all of those different buckets of ballots counted, then it may well be well past a week.
Well, every state has in their law a deadline when the election authorities have to report. Now, usually we know the results of most races well before then. Now, you say, when will we know the results? Well, there could be some small races for a library board that we might not, might be tied. I actually have a coin in my office, which is the official coin we flip when there's a tied race to determine who wins. But I think you're talking about the presidential race. And it's funny, you probably heard about our electoral college system. And one of the interesting things about it is most of the states will know which presidential candidate won that state that night, okay? it'll only be in these battleground states. And every year we predict some to be battleground states, and it turns out they're not, but other ones are. And those are the ones that's going to, take it. So that's, where all the election lawyers fly into that state, and the battle begins in the courts, and et cetera. So one of the nice things about the Electoral College is if this was a total popular vote nationwide, and it was a close race, and there was a recount, we'd have to count every ballot across the entire country. And that's how many hundreds of millions of ballots? Yeah. But this way, it's okay. It's only, New Hampshire. Okay, we can do West Virginia. Maybe that's the one that'll be the linchpin at who wins. And I found out tonight there are almost as many precincts in Chicago in all of West Virginia. So that's not so. Yeah. But, now, so most of it we will know by November, whatever, 7th, whatever. Now, if it's real tight in states that would decide whether they have enough votes in the Electoral College or not, then it could go on for a while. But I do not make, well, I do make predictions, but not in front of a room full of journalists, I don't. But maybe later over a cocktail. Not in front of a room full of journalists, no.
Here's the important thing, though, and this has not changed for this election. In every jurisdiction and state, there is a deadline by which they need to have their ballots counted and audited and reviewed and do the reconciliation, the ballot accounting, have their board certify that. There's a date certain by which the state has to certify that election. And I know it's not sexy to say you just got to wait for the official results, but those will happen. Those dates are set, and we might have to just be patient and wait.
Yeah, it does make a 24-hour news cycle a little problematic. Yeah, but we do our best, but we do want to get it right, and so that takes time. And but the president is sworn in until January 20th, so we got some time.
Well,
this woman right here has been raising her hand all night.
I'm Ruzana Zeynalova from Azerbaijan, again with the delegation, International Leadership Program of United States Department. Azerbaijan is famous for its oil, Caucasus Republic. And first of all, I'd like to say that I am fascinated with the process, pre-election process.
I'm sorry.
I am fascinated with the pre-election process in the country. Unfortunately, it's very different from my country. And I am a journalist. My job is related to disinformation. It was my mission to follow the disinformation frauds in my country before the elections. And we saw a large amount of disinformation frauds from South Iran and from North Russia, as both of them, mostly Russia, tries to keep under his influence, try to keep the country under its influence. I'd like to ask you which kind of disinformation you see and have to deal before the elections, as we see that they are as dangerous as frauds. And how do you deal with them? How do you deal with AI?
Yeah. I was waiting for the question about AI. Well, we were both at a conference right here in Washington a couple of months ago. And the AI thing is just phenomenal. This guy at the podium was having people yell out ideas, kind of like an improv comedy show. And it was like, give me the name of an idea of a song, or who's the singer, or give me what type of music. And it was like a Taylor Swift reggae song about, eating waffles or whatever, and typed it in, and not only created a song that sounded like Taylor Swift singing it about waffles to a reggae beat, but even made a music video behind it. It's And this, and I'm watching this, I'm going, thinking now as an election administrator, we've got our work cut out for us, and we do. But there are always going to be new challenges there, and as I say, what we election administrators and officials try to do is proactively address it. Be aware of it. Keep a watch out for what's being said on social media, and be able to, hit the ground running the next day and get something out there saying that's nonsense. And it's, but we got to do the best we can. But it is frightening.
I'm going to let you, I do have a response, but we've dominated the conversation.
No,
I think I'm gonna let you.
well, that's because I'm more of a financial guy than
Well, that's because he's the intellectual guy. Yes.
the financial guy that does the fraud from that perspective. What I was just going to say is that you want to be identify that, and I think we have to try and help citizens understand that just because you see something in video format, the first thing you've got to question yourself is this really true? Is this possibly a fake or a deep fake or whatever? And I know how hard that is. I have some elderly parents, and my father's forever calling me about some product that he saw something on the interweb and thinks it's going to be the greatest thing. And I'm like, Dad, let's think about this. Let's go and see if this product is available on Amazon. And if it is, what the ratings are. And does it do the things that is being claimed that it can do on the ad that you're looking at? And so it really can be challenging and confusing for the citizenry to see these deep fakes. And as you mentioned, there was the one up in, I think it was Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where they showed a video, it was just on the news today, tearing up ballots. And you just have to say, is this credible? Who is doing it? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? When are they doing it? How are they going about it? How many ballots are affected? And then do your little kind of semi or quick investigation to say, no, this isn't happening, and we can show that this is really some sort of a fake. But I think we have to confront them as soon as we identify them with contrary information and explain the real facts, and then the fact that this is fake and why it's fake and how it's fake, and the process that it went through. If we know where it came from, then we would like to know and put that out there as well. But I do think we really have to be careful not to kind of put our head in the sand and just let these things go on. We do have to be confrontational with them and investigate them quickly, and try to get the other side of the story or the other story out there, the other narrative.
My biggest worry, hands, is the scale, right? So there are hundreds, thousands of people writing BS posts out there on a whole variety of platforms, and we know that and we see that. But often they might have 30 likes, 5 retweets, or whatever we call them, re-Xing now. That's just always going to be. What's hard is when you have somebody that is a super spreader. Elon Musk puts something out that is not factual. It's not just hitting every citizen in this country, but it's going worldwide, right? You have a prominent candidate running for president that puts something out that's not factual. It's going to reach a much wider audience than Bill over here tapping out.
Oh, that's not how it's done. Yeah.
So it really is. And you have a foreign nation state with a whole army of individuals promoting false information. It's really tough for an individual election office or election official to combat that or to go up against that.
Yeah, I expressed before, I feel bad for some of my colleagues in the election world, election space, who have had it bad. I really feel sorry, really, for the good citizens out there who are trying to make it the choice and are being victimized by these various forces. And so all we can do is, tell them the truth, and hopefully that gets through. So it's frustrating.
Other questions from the audience?
This gentleman over here.
There we
How you
go.
doing?
With that.
My name is Roger Berkeley. I'm also from Ireland, so hi, Ashley. So I work as a political strategist with British Strategy. So I've worked with elections in Ireland, in the UK, and European Parliament. And one thing that really strikes me since I've moved over here, and obviously this is being talked a lot about as well, is just the issue of voter ID. So pretty much every democracy in the world, you have to have voter ID. It's not always requested, but you have to have it when you go to the ballot box. Recently Gavin Newsom banned, I think, voter ID in California. So, I mean, Jennifer, you were saying that 2020 was the most secure election in history. 2024 is even more secure. How can you kind of say that when you don't have mandatory voter ID and one of the states actually bans requesting voter ID? Like, could you just kind of explain that a little bit? And obviously, if the other two have any input on that as well, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sure, and many of those countries also have like a national ID card, correct? Like national identification that you can use. Probably I won't comment on California, but 80% of the voters who register often are registering through a Department of Motor Vehicles office or online, two places where they actually are required to provide proof of citizenship and proof of residency when they do that. Certainly when they turn in an application to register to vote, that goes through a series of checks as well. Now, do different states have different policies? There are some states that just rely on the affidavit, so they may still go through all of the checks to verify citizenship and your address, your residency, and feel comfortable about that, but you have not provided ID that they can use, but you've signed an affidavit under penalty of perjury that the information you're providing is correct. So there are some states that is enough. California is one of those, that signing that affidavit is enough, but it's actually, I would say the majority of voters are providing ID both to register and then when they go to vote at the polls. Again, I realize you're not wrong. States have different policies. Many years ago at our founding, we decided that each state would have the right to run their own elections and set their own laws and policies. And it's as much of a strength for us as it is a detriment sometimes. And I definitely wish we had more standards and laws in common with one another. I think it would make the misinformation easier. But I don't know if that's a good answer, but I just say mail ballots the same. Often when you're voting for the first time, you've got to provide ID when you cast that mail ballot. So it actually is happening quite a bit. But there are certainly cases where it's not, and you're simply just affirming that the information you're providing is true. Help me out.
No. This is really controversial in Illinois, where we do not have voter ID. And I'm not going to comment. Because on advice of counsel, I really don't want to comment on that. Thank you, though.
The West Virginia law is 2 pieces of ID to get registered. You need a piece of ID that identifies you as a person, and then you also need a piece of ID that identifies that you're a resident of West Virginia, so something like a bank statement, a utility bill. And then when you go to vote, you actually have to have an ID to prove who you are again. So as you say, West Virginia is one of 50 states, and it's a relatively small one. All states are different. But certainly when we look at fraud, so fraud can be financial statement fraud now, or financial fraud. One of the things we talk about is that we have something called a predator. That's a person that's committed a fraud in more than one place, in more than one company that they've stolen from. One of the things when we're talking about how to prevent fraud, and that is to keep them out of the company. Don't let them get hired. Make sure you've got a robust HR to try and keep the fraudsters out. And so, the integrity of the elections is really determinant on the election rolls and making sure that those are put together with integrity. And so, I respect California and their choices, and I respect West Virginia and our choices, and you are going to see differences, but it is really important that you try to keep those voter rolls clean, because those are the people that are entitled to vote and will vote.
Just to clarify, Illinois, yes, we require identification forms of some sort to register, and they do sign an affidavit. And then when you come and vote, you fill out a form giving your address, your name, and a signature. And we, check our rolls, which we do a lot of work keeping our rolls good and clean. And then, and then we compare signatures. If the signatures don't match, and we train our people how to look at them, and we have one judge who's a Democrat and one who's a Republican compare, and if they don't match, then they'll be requested to show identification. But we do have some, and we have had very few instances of impersonator fraud. Somebody who, the few times we catch someone, it's usually like it's John Smith Jr. who came in, they checked him off as John Smith Sr., and then it gets cleared up. But we've not had many cases of somebody trying to do that.
And
No, go ahead.
what Bill's describing is pretty common in most states. So you've gone through a verification when you registered. When you go to vote, in states that don't require ID, there's something you still have to provide to show that you are you. So it might be signing the poll book and comparing signatures. It might be providing some personal information that the poll worker verifies against the record. But there is some process of making sure that you match up with the person that you're claiming to be.
We have time for one more question. Did somebody over here?
Gentleman with the hat over here had a question.
Okay.
Yes. See, that's.
Thank you very much. Reda Kacikwenyu, a journalist from Germany. I'm also part of the IAVLP state-funded program. My question indulges in the authority arguments that we talked about, Elon Musk and super spreaders, and I'm personally also grateful to have these many perspectives on stage, and I would say the abundance of expertise that has been shared with us. So I would like to then ask about how can we move forward in these elections when we are seeing people with a wide reach being able to publish. We had misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, if I quote you correctly. Are there also initiatives to work with people on the other side who do publish facts with empiric evidence to kind of combat these movements and also the diminishing trust in traditional classic media?
Yeah. So I think if I understand you right, I mean, there are attempts to do boosted ads, paying to boost the information that you're putting out there. I think it was alluded to earlier. There's been a lot of work trying to do direct outreach with journalists, and I think they're doing a great job covering the election. Is it enough to sort of counter the misinformation? I don't know. I'm probably not the expert to answer that. But I think some good efforts are being made. It still feels like, though, and I'm sure I've got a bias here, that misinformation, disinformation is winning. We didn't really talk about this a lot, but these election administrators and poll workers and others that are working in this field, the technology providers that support them, groups like mine, NGOs, nonprofits, we're still dealing with a barrage of hate and threats and harassment. I mean, death threats. There are jurisdictions that have snipers on their roof. There's a small county in Pennsylvania that just put boulders in front of their door to protect against a bomb going off. Most of the election offices I know have invested in bulletproof glass over the last 4 years, right? One of my employees has been told somebody wants to slit her throat. I mean, this is still happening. This has not changed. It's heartbreaking. It's hard. So I don't know. I think, again, there's been a great effort to counter that, but it's not changed the just daily bombardment that these individuals are facing in person, email, phone, in person on a regular daily basis.
Bill,
Trying to do the
Dick,
best we can. And hopefully survive it.
Indeed. Thank you all for being with us today and sparking this stimulating conversation that was hopeful and distressing at the same time. We appreciate each of you being here. Thank you to the audience who showed up, particularly our international friends. Thank you for joining us. I also want to thank on the Press Club staff, Cecily Scott Martin and Madison Siciliano, who were instrumental to putting this event together tonight. Thank you to JP and his colleagues at the Broadcast Operations Center who provided the live stream. And let me just say that I hope each of you picked up an upcoming events paper when you came in to see what else we've got going on at the club here in the next couple of weeks. And let me highlight tomorrow, a headliners breakfast with Veterans Affairs Secretary Dennis McDonough. That will be tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Here at the club. And we have a headliners event with Ken Burns, the documentary filmmaker, on Tuesday, November 12th at 2 p.m. He'll be talking about his latest film, Leonardo da Vinci. And with that, let me also say, as membership secretary, I feel that it's my duty to mention that if any of you, as you were sitting here, thought, gee, I'd like to become part of this organization, come see me afterwards and I can tell you about our membership categories and how you can apply. So thank you all for joining us this evening at the National Press Club, and I hope each of you has a good night.